All right, so here is our first introduction to pre-calc honors, guys. This is section 1112. This first chapter, I'm going to refer to a lot with, you guys should remember this from last year, or you should have remembered this from whatever. If you sit there and go, oh, I don't really remember this, that's okay. That's why we're revisiting it. But we're not going to spend a ton of time on it because it is a review of some previous concepts that we've done. All right, when we talk about these three formulas that are important to know, we're not going to give you these on a test or a quiz. You guys should know these. The slope formula, that's the direction and how much a line changes its steepness, whether it's, flatter, closer to the x-axis, or steeper, closer to the y-axis. And our slope formula would be the two y values, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. We remember that? Okay. Distance. What does distance mean? What's distance? How far points are. What can distance never be? Negative. Good. So if you end up, and we'll talk about this a little more, but if you end up with a negative underneath a radical, like if I had something like this, like the square root of negative 4. Does anybody know what the square root of negative 4 is? What's the square root of 4? 2. Good. And when there's a negative underneath, what does that mean? It's imaginary. Good. So it's be plus or minus 2i. Can you have an imaginary length? No. So that should give you a hint as you're working through this, right? And we're doing our computation and we're thinking, oh my gosh, distance is so easy when I just subtract these, and then you get the square root of a negative number. You should think, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. I probably did something wrong. But with our distance formula, we're just going to take the 2 points. We're going to subtract the x's, square that result. We're going to subtract the y's, square that result. Add them together, take the square root. And then midpoint. What is a midpoint? The middle. It's the middle of a line, right? So you're just going to take the 2 x's on either end. You add them up, cut it in half, divide by 2. Take the 2 y's on either end, add it up, divide by 2. Sound good? All right, let's do one together. Let's pick a point. Somebody make up a point. Okay, so A is going to be 4, 6. And let's make B something with negatives. Negative 1, negative 6. Okay, perfect. And sometimes my handwriting's not great, so just if you need to say, is that a 6 or a B, just let me know. All right, so we're going to find all three of these things. We're going to find the slope, we're going to find the distance, and we're going to find the midpoint. So if I'm going to find the slope, all right, sometimes it's helpful to remind ourselves the first coordinate, or the first part of our coordinate is our x. The second coordinate, or part of the coordinate, is the y. If I'm going to do the slope, my slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Does it really matter which y I put first? No. Doesn't matter which y I put first. But it does determine which x I have to put first. Right? I knew what you meant. So I don't care which one you guys pick. What do you want to do? Positive 6. So I'm going to say positive 6 minus negative 6. Make sure you keep your negatives. And then on the bottom, since I started with positive 6 for my y, I need to start with what? Positive 4 for my x. So I have 4 minus negative 1. Now, guys, I'm just coming off summer break just like you are. If I make a mistake here, if I said 6 minus negative 6 is 0, is that true? No. Please don't sit there and let me do the whole problem. And then when I go, wait, where did I make a mistake? You're like, well, back in the first step. Let me know I made a mistake. You don't have to yell at me. Just say like, hey, shouldn't that be? No big deal. I make mistakes all the time. So 6 minus negative 6, good, is positive 12. 4 minus the negative 1 is positive 5. So my slope here is positive 12 over 5. Do I simplify that to a mixed number? No. Do I change it to a decimal? No. Yep, rise over run. From 1 point, how many spaces did I go up? How many spaces did I go over? Which way is this going to slope? Upwards. It's going to be an upwards line. How'd you guys know that? Because it's good. Very good. See, we remember. Wonderful. All right, distance. Let's do distance. Again, with distance, I like to write out the formula. It's x2 minus x1, y2 minus y1. Now, in this formula, guys, Does it matter which x I put first? How come? You're right, but how come it doesn't matter? Why doesn't it though? Because what are you doing to each parenthesis? You're right, it doesn't matter, but why? Because you're squaring it. If I have positive 2, what's positive 2 squared? 4. What's negative 2 squared? 4. Now, some of you use a calculator. We forget our parentheses in the calculator. You type in negative 2 and hit squared, and you're like, my calculator says negative 4. I'm going to say this a lot, and I just mean it in jest, but the calculator is only as smart as the user. If you don't tell the calculator to plug in negative 2 squared by putting it in parentheses, it's just going to square 2 and then multiply it by that negative sign, which is negative 1 out in front. So just remember, guys, when you square a negative number, the result is positive, right? So let's remind ourselves what our points are. I have A was 4, 6, and I have my B was negative 1, negative 6. So let's fill in our formula. My x's are 4 and negative 1. So I'm just going to say 4 minus negative 1 squared plus my y's, 6 minus negative 6 squared. Now, again, you could have done it the other way. Negative 6 minus 6, negative 1 minus 4. Result's going to be the same. So as we simplify, this is how you show your work. The more work you can show me, the more thought process that you can put down on paper, the more credit I can give you on a test or a quiz. Everybody understand that? Show me your work. Show me what your brain's doing. So 4 minus negative 1 is going to give me 5 squared. 6 minus negative 6 is going to give me what? 12 squared. Good. What's 5 squared?
25.
What's 12 squared?
144.
What's 144 and 25?
169.
169. Is it? How did we pick those numbers? Now, do I leave that answer and just say, oh, good, it's the square root of 169?
No.
What is the square root of 169? 13. In reality, the square root of 169 is plus or minus 13. But why is the negative not part of our answer? Because it's distance. All right, hypothetically speaking, this is not the answer, but hypothetically speaking, I came out with the square root of 45. Do I leave it like that?
No.
Why not? I agree. But why not?
Because you gotta separate the square.
Is there a perfect square inside? Yes. Guys, in pre-calc honors, I don't have to say simplify your answer. You always know simplify as much as possible. When you simplify a radical and give an exact answer, it's not a decimal. You break down 45. What times what is 45? A perfect square and a non-perfect square? 9 and 5, right? What's the square root of 9? So this would be 3 root 5. Always, always, always simplify our radicals. Always break down when we can. All right? Deal? We're good? All right, you guys are killing it. Good job. All right, so what was my point again? 4, 6. And B was negative 1, negative 6. All right, now I need to find the midpoint. What did we say midpoint is again? The middle. So I'm just going to take my x's and I'm going to add them together. So 4 plus negative 1. Some of you are going to say, can I just write 4 minus 1? Of course, that's fine. But 4 plus negative 1, I'm going to divide that by 2. That's my x. And then my y is going to be 6, what?
Minus.
Plus negative 6, or 6 minus 6 divided by 2. That's my y value. So guys, what is 4 plus a negative 1? 3. So I have my x value of my midpoint would be 3 over 2. What's another way I could write 3 over 2?
1
1 and 1/2, or
1.5.
1.5. Okay, that's fine. As long as it's a terminating decimal, I don't mind. And then what happens here? What is 6 plus a negative 6? And then what's 0? Yep, 0 over 2 is? So there is my midpoint. So very likely on that first quiz, I'm going to give you 2 points, and I'm going to ask you for what? The distance, that's good. Distance, midpoint, and slope. Don't combine them all like I just said. All right, how do we feel? All right, let's look at this. It says, find the equation of a line with the given information. Well, let's remember what the equation of lines look like. There's 2 I want to talk about. I want to talk about slope intercept. Remember I told you English isn't really my thing? That goes along with spelling. If I spell something wrong, you don't have to tell me, unless you have absolutely no idea what I was trying to say. But, like if I add or subtract incorrectly, yes. If I don't spell it right, my apologies. Slope-intercept form, anybody remember?
Y equals X.
Yes, ma'am. Y equals mx plus b. In this form, when we have our equation in slope-intercept form, y and x stay as variables. What is m?
M is the slope.
M is the slope. And what is b? Perfect. The y-intercept. What does that mean? Where it crosses. Yep, good. Where it crosses the x-axis. All right, does anybody remember? This is what we use probably 90% of the time. But does anybody remember point slope? Anybody know why they call it point slope? What do you think the information is that they'll give you? A point and the slope. Okay, point slope is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Where m is the what?
Slope.
See, I meant to say slope. And what do you think the x1 and y1 are? It's the point given. All right? You can very easily, if they give you a point and the slope, put it into this point slope form. And then do we know a bit of algebra that we could convert it to slope intercept? Absolutely. You can distribute the slope and then move things around so y is by itself. So on a quiz, you could be given information and say, hey, write the equation of this line in point slope form. Write the equation of the line in y equals mx plus b, or slope intercept. So let's just look at it. I want to find the equation of the line with the given information. They tell me the slope and the point. I'm going to put this into point slope form, and then I'm going to translate it or convert it into slope intercept. If you want to do that, that's fine. If you don't want to do that, you can put it right into slope intercept and just find the information. I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. So let's do the first thing. I'm going to use point slope. Bad color. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay? I'll show you two ways to do this. Here is my x1. Here's my y1. I know you guys know that in a point, x is first, y is second. But as you go through this, and we get a little careless because this is a quote-unquote, you guys are easy topic. It's very easy to put the 7 and the -1 in the wrong spot. So take a second to put an x over the -1 and a y over the 7. You don't have to, just saying. So as I fill in here, I'm going to say y minus, what's the y that I'm going to plug in? Good, 7 equals, what's the slope?
2
Times x minus a -1. So I'm going to write x plus 1. Now that is point slope form. You took the point and the slope, and that's your point slope form. But a lot of times it's going to ask for slope intercept. So you can use point slope and now just use algebra to get it into y equals, because watch what happens here. What do I do with this 2? I'm going to distribute it, right? So I have y minus 7 equals 2 times x, we write 2x. 2 times 1, we write plus 2. Everybody with me?
Yes.
What's the last thing I can do to get y all by itself? I'm going to add 7 to both sides. So I have y equals 2x plus 9. Perfect. What is the slope of this equation? Where does it cross the y-axis? Perfect. Right? We okay with that? All right, I'm going to do this next equation, but I'm not going to use the point slope form. You may have been taught how to do this in algebra when you guys have done this. Again, there's a million different ways to do things. So I'm going to give you guys the option. Instead of using point slope, which you can, but instead of using it, I'm just going to go right ahead and say, okay, y equals mx plus b. Do I have the slope? Did they already give that to me?
Yes.
Do I have the y-intercept?
Yes.
No. I got to find it. I have a point that I can plug in to find the y-intercept, but I don't have it yet. So in this case, like I said, you could use point slope form. You could say y plus 2 equals -3/4 times x minus 3, right? Distribute, move stuff around. If you want to do that now. I'm going to just skip that point slope, and I'm going to go with the given information. I'm going to find the y-intercept and then create my equation. So the slope that I'm going to use is negative 3/4, correct? And the point that I'm going to use to find my y-intercept or my b is given, 3, negative 2. So x is 3, and y is negative 2, correct? Yep, x and y, okay. Hey guys, guess what? How many of you just think fractions are the coolest thing in the world? Get excited, you're gonna see them a lot. If it becomes a terminating decimal, what do I mean by terminating? If it ends, right? If you have 3/2 and you're like, ooh, I hate fractions, change it to 1.5, it's fine. But if it does not terminate, like if I have, 2/3, that's 0.6666666 repeating, you gotta leave it as a fraction. Just saying. All right, so I have negative 2 equals, when I have negative 3/4 times 3, what does that give me? Negative 9/4 plus b. All right, I want to get b by itself, so what do I do?
Well, b by itself, yeah. Subtract.
I'm going to move this over here. So if I have negative, I'm going to do what? That's all right. Add 9/4 to both sides. Now, in this case right here, can you guys see that red? I'm going to change the whole number, negative 2, to fourths. So if this is 2/1, if I'm going to change it to fourths, what would it become? 8/4. Everybody with me? Now is this an easier problem to look at? What's negative 8 plus 9?
1/4.
Right? 1/4. So that's my y-intercept. So now, do I have enough information to write this in slope-intercept form? Do I have the slope?
Yeah.
Do I have the y-intercept? So I have y equals negative 3/4 x plus 1/4. So what I just did there, guys, is I showed you 90% of the time they're going to say, write this equation in slope-intercept form. This is a longer way to go about it. Generally, it's not that hard unless you're dealing with fractions, and then it gets a little dicey. But if you want to take the point and the slope, plug it into point slope form, and then just manipulate, you'd get the same answer. Or you can just go right ahead, use the point that they give you, find the intercept, then plug it back into slope-intercept form. How do we feel? Find the equation of the line. All they did was give me 2 points. So what are the pieces of information that I need in order to write the equation of a line? Slope and y-intercept. Well, they gave me 2 points. Can I find the slope here?
Yes.
Okay. So this is x, this is x, this is y, this is y. So slope. y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. What y do you want me to use? Okay, so 7 minus 1. Agreed?
Yes.
Okay, and then what minus what? Negative 8 minus negative 8.
Which becomes plus.
Okay, so I have 6/0. What's my slope? Ooh, undefined. Good. I remember teaching, I taught middle school a couple years. I remember teaching this in, I think it was first introduced in 6th grade. 0 over a number versus a number over 0. For some reason, that is a concept we just cannot get in our brains. Can you ever divide by 0? No, it's undefined. Can you have 0 in a numerator? Yes. So think about what kind of a line we're going to have if the slope is undefined. Is it a horizontal one or is it a vertical one? All right, this is how I like to look at it. All right, here's my coordinate plane, yes? Here's my vertical line. Pretend it's the straightest line you've ever seen. And here's my horizontal line. Slope, right? Think of slope like you're hiking. If it's a steep slope, it's going to be a hard hike, right? If it's just a real gentle slope, it's going to be an easy one. Which line can you walk across? The horizontal one. There's no slope there. It doesn't go up and down, doesn't go down, just no slope. If I was standing right here, and I'm not Spider-Man, can I walk up this wall? It's undefined. You can't do it. So which line am I going to have here if it's an undefined slope? It's going to be a what? It's going to be a what? An up and down one. It's vertical. It's going to be a vertical line. When we write the equation of a line, that's vertical. Okay, a vertical line. Vertical goes up and down, right? So what is this passing through? What axis? So this is going to be a vertical line at x equals, -8. If it's a horizontal line, look, what axis does it go through? The y. So it's going to be at y equals. We get confused a lot that since it's a vertical line, you think it should be y equals. Because, well, it's going up and down, but what axis is it crossing? If it's crossing the x-axis, that's why it's a y equals. All right, let's talk about something real quick, and this is the last thing. Let's talk about parallel and perpendicular. Parallel, perpendicular. Here we go with my spelling. Parallel, yes? Yeah. Okay. Perpendicular. Forgot the R. All right, let's talk about what these words mean. What is parallel? All right, like this, touchdown, right? Like this. Parallel lines never do what? Never touch. They never touch. They're always the same distance away. What do we know about a parallel lines and their slopes? Same. Very good. They're equal. They have the same slope. That's super duper important to remember. The sign or the abbreviation for parallel is like this. If you guys ever see that, like line L is parallel to M, it looks like that. What does perpendicular mean? How do they cross? They do cross like this, right? Like a T at a 90-degree angle. This is perpendicular. They cross at a 90-degree angle. What do we know about those slopes?
They're reciprocal.
There's two things. They're reciprocals and they're negative reciprocal. They're opposite of each other. So we'll say it's a negative reciprocal. Now some of you are looking at me going, oh, reciprocal. I remember that word. Don't know what it means, but I remember it. Okay? They're going to be opposite signs of each other. So if one of them is negative, the other one's going to be positive. What does it mean if something is a reciprocal? What does the fraction do? It flips. So if I tell you that you have a slope of 2/3, and I want you to write the perpendicular, it'd be -3/2. It has to be opposite signs, one positive, one negative, and the slopes have to be reciprocals of each other. So this gets us sometimes. Here, I have a slope of -4. What's my perpendicular slope? Positive 1/4. Because remember, when we have a whole number, what number is underneath that we don't necessarily have to write? That'll get you guys sometimes. So when you're given information, it says write the equation of the line that is both parallel and perpendicular. Well, you have to say, okay, well, what's the slope of this line? If I want a line that's parallel, I'm going to use the same slope. If I want a line that's perpendicular, I'm going to use the opposite reciprocal, right? Okay. Good, good, good. All right, so let's look at this. I want to write the equation of the line through a given point that's both parallel and perpendicular. So what that question is telling me is, okay, I have to first figure out what the slope is of this given line. Then I have to write something that's both parallel and perpendicular. Yes? All right, so look at this line. Guys, just look at it. Just tell me what the slope is. Can I just look at this and tell you what the slope is? This equation is in what's called standard form. It goes x, then y, the equal sign, the constant. In order to just look at an equation and say, oh, the slope is blah, 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 what does it have to be in? What kind of form? Slope-intercept. So that means the first thing I have to do is isolate, get y all by itself. So let's do a little bit of algebra. What's the first thing I'm going to do to get y by itself? Not yet. We're going to subtract the 3x. We need to move that 3x over. So 3x is gone. I'm left with 4y equals negative 3x plus 7. Agreed? Is y all by itself yet?
No.
So now I divide by 4. Good. And I have to divide everything by 4. So I have y equals negative 3/4 x plus 7/4. So tell me, now looking, what's the slope of this line? Negative 3/4. Where does this particular line cross the y-axis? At 7/4, which is in between.
1 and 2.
There you go, 1 and 2, in between 1 and 2. So now I'm going to write I'm going to write two equations. I'm going to write one that's parallel to this, and I'm going to write one that's perpendicular. So I'm going to give myself a little space here, and I'm going to say this parallel line, what slope am I going to use for the parallel line?
Negative 3 over 4.
Negative 3 over 4. Perfect. Then I'm going to go over here just to remind myself, and I'm going to say, okay, the perpendicular slope that I'm going to use is what?
4 over 3.
Positive 4 over 3. I guarantee you'll have a question on your quiz. Probably not going to ask you to do all of this because it's kind of time consuming. But some questions will say, even here, give me a line that's parallel. Some will say, give me a line that's perpendicular. So now that we know the slopes that we're going to use, they want us, to pass through a point negative 2/3 and 7/8. So negative 2/3 and 7/8. Same thing over here. Negative 2/3 and 7/8. Now, from what we did the slide or two earlier, there's two ways you can do this. I want this equation to be in slope-intercept form. I want it to say y equals mx plus b. So you can either use point-slope form with what they gave you, substitute back in, or not substitute, to rearrange, or you can just go right ahead, find the y-intercept, and then plug it in. I'm going to do both ways. The first parallel line, we're going to use point-slope, and then convert it to y equals. So I'm going to say, okay, y minus, what's the y that I'm going to use? 7 over 8, good. Oh, it's a fraction. The slope I'm using is negative 3/4. And then I have x minus a negative gives me plus, right? Everybody agree? Okay. Not bad, not bad. Now all we're going to do is just distribute and move stuff around. I'm going to keep y minus 7/8 over here equals, when I distribute, I get negative 3/4 x. And then over here, what happens?
You have to make them even.
We don't have to. If you were adding or subtracting, yes, but you don't have to when you're multiplying. We can either cross cancel the 3's, right? The 3's will cancel out, and then 2 over 4 cancels. Or you can just say, what's negative 3 times 2?
Negative 6.
Negative 6 over, what's 4 times 3?
12.
12. Can I simplify that?
Yes.
Do I have to simplify it right now? You don't have to. I would, just because the numbers will be smaller as you're working, but I'm going to simplify that to what? Yep, so I have 1 minus 7/8 equals negative 3/4 minus what? Whoops, I forgot the S. 1/2. And then I have one more thing to do, because I need that y to be all by itself. I'm going to add 7/8 to both sides. And again, we're like, oh my gosh, I hate fractions. Guys, it's okay. Change 1/2 to 8. Right? 2 times 4 would be 8. So 4 times 1, right? You guys with me? So I have negative 3/4 x. This is negative. What's negative 4/8 plus 7/8? What's negative 4 plus 7? 3 over 8. Now, I'm not asking you to graph this. I'm just asking you algebraically to work this out. The hardest part of this problem is the fractions. Our fractions from high school. No, you guys have seen fractions for a long time. We just shy away from them because we don't like them, but you guys will be okay, I promise. All right, so if we're gonna find the perpendicular one, how do you like doing this better? Do you like going from point slope to slope intercept? Or do you like just finding the y-intercept and putting it right into slope intercept form? Point slope, easier? Okay, that's all right. I'm gonna do it the other way just for another example, but if you guys like it that way, do it that way, that's fine. This is my x, this is my y. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna go right ahead into slope intercept. I'm gonna say y equals mx plus b. I have to find the b first. So I'm gonna use the x and the y that they gave me. I'm gonna say 7/8 equals, the slope is 4/3, times the x that they gave me is negative 2/3, right? Plus b. Again, this is the second way. This is just skipping the whole point slope thing, which again, whichever works for you guys. So I have 7/8 equals, when I multiply this, 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. 3 times 3 is 9, correct?
Yes.
Plus b. Now I want to get b solo. So I'm going to add 8/9 to both sides. And we're like, what? Guys, what's a common denominator between 8 and 9? What's a common denominator? Good, between 8 and 9, 72. It's okay. To get from 8 to 72, I have to multiply by what? So what you do to the bottom, you do to the top, because we're fair. So 9 times 7 is 63. You guys with me? Okay, so 9 times 8 is 72, yes? So 8 times 8 is 64. What's 63 and 64?
127.
So 127 over 72. It's gross. Am I asking you to graph that? No. But now you have your intercept and you have the slope to use. So to y equals mx plus b, y equals 4/3 x plus 127 over 72. Again, I am not asking you to graph that. But if you go back and compare, parallel lines have what kind of slope? Same, right? So look at this. Negative 3/4, negative 3/4. It's the same? All right. Perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocals. Negative 3/4 and positive 4/3. Reciprocals of each other? Negative opposites of each other? All right, good to go.